It was Halloween night. Me and the boys were out around 8 p.m. hitting up the houses we usually get Big Beagle's candy bars from. The street smelled like wet leaves and cheap plastic masks. Most porch lights glowed faint, but this one house sat bright and loud with a long line. Kids joked, but the adults stayed back. When I reached the steps, I saw a table with a strange box. The adult waved each person forward. A soft beep followed each scan. It dropped a single wrapped bar into every bag. No smiles. No talking. When my turn came, I felt the cold sensor press my wrist. It beeped twice. The adult paused, then nodded. I got my candy. My friend got only one beep. That earned him 2 candies. A kid ahead of me had 3 beeps and got a whole handful. People whispered about the pattern. The adults refused to answer. The line moved fast and no one argued. We moved along the block, but I kept looking at my wrist. There was a faint red circle where the device touched. I tried rubbing it off, but the mark stayed. My friend had a faint blue one. The kid with 3 beeps had a green one. We compared them under a street lamp. Each color glowed faint in the dark like it reacted to the night air. We hit 5 more houses, regular candy. Nothing strange. Then we spotted another house with a scanner. Different adult. Same box. Same beeps. Same colors. When my wrist went under, it beeped twice again. The adult checked a clipboard where my number got logged. I saw columns with long lists. Some names crossed out. Some boxed twice. My friend got logged too. The clipboard looked old and stained. We walked on. At the next street corner, a black van idled. No windows. No license plates. It followed at slow speed. Kids ignored it at first until it sped ahead and parked at another scanning house. Adults spoke into radios and watched the lines of kids. Parents started to pull their kids away. My group kept going because we wanted to see where this led. At the 3rd scanning house, the adult with a device pointed at me and another kid with the same red mark. They waved us aside into a narrow yard path. I felt my chest tighten, but I kept going to avoid drawing attention. Inside the backyard, the tall fence blocked the view. 2 more adults waited. They held a larger scanner. It hummed loud. They grabbed my wrist and scanned. The red circle lit brighter. They told me to wait. I waited. The other kid got scanned, and their mark dimmed. The adults waved them out a side gate. That kid ran off. I stayed. One adult wrote numbers on a small tag and stuck it inside my candy bag. The other told me to continue collecting from the rest of the block. No reason. No feeling. I walked away. As I moved house to house, other kids across the street stopped getting scanned. The scanners closed early. The black van left. I saw police lights at a distance, but the scanner houses powered out their porch lights and locked doors. Most kids went home. I hurried too. At home, I dumped my candy on the kitchen table. The tag inside my bag had a QR code and 2 letters. My mom took it and tossed it in the trash. She told me not to worry. I removed everything from my bag and checked again. The red mark on my wrist was gone. I thought maybe it faded, but I could still see a faint outline under a bright lamp. I covered it with a bandage. Next day, school buzzed with scans. Some kids got letters in the mail asking them to visit a clinic for a free checkup. They had green or blue marks. I got nothing. The kid who had the 3 beeps never came to class again. Nobody talked about it. A week later, late at night, I saw the black van parked outside the same scanning house. Adults walked inside with binders. They left before sunrise. The house went up for sale the next day. Fresh paint covered sign holes. New owners moved in fast. They ripped out wires and patched walls. Months passed. I never saw the red glow again, but under certain lights I thought I saw it pulsing. One time in gym, our teacher pulled kids aside and checked their wrists. He wrote notes. Only kids who trick or treated on that street got flagged. He never explained. The kid with the 3 beeps popped up online months later. Their parents posted a picture of them at a science camp far away. Comments turned off. The kid smiled but looked thinner. On the last day of school, flyers got handed out warning about unauthorized devices on Halloween. They listed safety tips and a hotline. The scanning house address was not listed. My friend with the blue mark moved to another district. His wrist never glowed, but he got nervous around cameras. I kept the tag even though my mom threw it away. I fished it from the trash that night. The QR code led to a blank page. Only an error message. I checked the source, but nothing loaded without a password. The letters on the tag faded until they looked like dust. I waited another Halloween. Same street, different families. No scanners. No vans. Kids ran around harmless. I held out my wrist to random porch lights, but nothing glowed. The faint outline still appears in mirrors at odd angles. If I stand close, I see tiny dots where the device pressed. They look like data ports. I cover them under sleeves. I told no one. It stayed quiet. On random nights, my phone screen flashes with a red pixel in the top corner. It flickers once, then stops. Feels like someone checks in. I disable everything, but it returns. I walk past the old scanning house sometimes. New owners decorated with pumpkins and plastic skulls. They smile at neighbors. They have no idea the fence once hid columns of names. I stand at the curb staring at the door and wonder if they live here safe. I never got sick, never missed school. Teachers look at me when attendance starts, then move on. Nothing unusual, but I sense a silent list. At festivals, someone scans tickets at the gate. Their device beeps twice when I walk by, even though I have no ticket. They glance at my wrist and nod me through. I keep moving. I have a dream every few weeks. A humming box scans my wrist. It beeps twice. Characters flash that I cannot read. The hum gets louder, and when I wake up, my wrist feels warm. Every Halloween, I think about lining up again just to know what the numbers meant. I wonder how many houses share the scanners. Maybe they map families. Maybe they track habits. I do not feel scared. I just feel watched. Parents warned kids to avoid strangers with gadgets now. They think candy can be contaminated, but they ignore data harvesting. My mom throws away anything weird, but she does not see the mark. I check the mirror again. The faint outline pulses once, then stops. I pull my sleeve down and head outside. I do not knock on scanning houses anymore. I pick quiet blocks. I keep my bag light, and I leave early. The night still smells like wet leaves. Kids laugh and run. I walk slow. The black van has not returned. Police never asked questions. No reporters came. The flyers got recycled. My friend with the blue mark deleted his social accounts. He said nothing. The kid with the 3 beeps never came back. Camps changed. Addresses changed. Contact lost. People forget fast. Lists stay quiet. The red outline sits under my skin like an old stamp. It waits. I wait too. Halloween felt annoying that year. I was tired from school, and I only went out because my friends pushed me. We split up early since we wanted to hit more houses. I walked alone on a long street full of old trees and too many shadows. The houses looked like they were patched together over time. Lights flickered, and you could hear distant music from cheap speakers. Nothing crazy at first, just boring decorations and regular candy. I noticed them near the end of the block. 3 clowns. Not funny clowns. Their makeup looked cheap and cracked, and their hair was wild and uneven like someone cut it blind. They stood behind a group of little kids and just watched. No parents with them. No bags for candy. They leaned in and smelled the air like they were waiting to pick a target. The first time I glanced, they stared back. The second time, they tilted their heads at the same angle like they practiced it. I walked faster. The street turned quiet behind me. I heard shoes scraping pavement. I tried to be calm. I hit 2 houses fast and skipped the small talk. My candy bag felt heavier than it should have. My chest felt tight, but I pretended it was nothing. When I turned around again, the clowns stood across the street under a broken street lamp. Their makeup glowed under the dim orange light. Their shadows stretched longer than normal. I hurried to the next street. Kids laughed around me, but none of them noticed the clowns. It felt like only I could see them. Every time I looked back, they got closer. One of them dragged a plastic hammer on the ground. It made a low scraping sound. It was not very loud, just enough to get under my skin. I kept moving house to house. Normal people kept giving out candy. No one looked behind me. I wanted to tell someone, but my voice felt stuck. I cut through a yard to get away faster. A loose fence board rattled under my hand. I heard footsteps crunch through leaves behind me. Faster this time. I checked again, and the clowns were halfway down the block, moving in long, fast strides. Their shoes slapped the road like wet rubber. I felt sweat on my neck. I pushed into another street. Not many houses had lights on. They felt darker than it should have been. A group of teens passed me laughing about lame costumes. I blended in and walked with them for a minute. When I turned to check again, the clowns had followed too, mixing into the crowd. They never broke eye contact. The teens split off at a corner store. I got left behind. I reached a cul-de-sac with only 3 houses lit. I ran to the brightest one and grabbed a handful of candy from a bowl. The door was cracked open, but nobody answered. I felt like someone watched from behind the curtains. I backed away and saw the clowns at the mouth of the cul-de-sac. They blocked the exit. Their plastic hammer tapped the ground 3 times in a slow rhythm. I darted behind a shed into a side yard and jumped over a tiny fence into a driveway. I scraped my hand but kept going. I cut through a row of parked cars. Their windows showed my reflection with wide eyes and messy costume makeup. The clowns moved faster now. They did not speak. One clown reached into his jacket and pulled out a balloon shaped like an animal. He twisted it and let it squeal loudly. The sound echoed between houses. I did not want to know what it meant. I took off sprinting down the block. My bag bounced and candy spilled behind me. I did not stop. I turned into a familiar street near my friend's place. Their porch light was off. They probably went inside already. I could not bother them. I ran past and felt the air change, like cooler and thinner. The clown's footsteps slammed the ground like they were right behind me. I refused to look back. I cut through a quiet path behind a row of garages. Trash bins lined the wall. Overflowing bags blocked the walkway. I stumbled once on a loose lid. The footsteps slowed. When I turned, the clowns stood at the entrance of the path but did not follow deeper into the dark. They looked frustrated. One of them raised their hand, showing a handful of candy wrappers tied together like tags. I realized they were collecting wrappers from kids, maybe marking which ones to follow. I moved further down until the path opened behind a grocery store. The bright lights and people unloading boxes made me feel safe. The clowns watched from the shadows but did not cross the bright line of fluorescent light. I walked around the parking lot to avoid getting them an easy route toward me. A security guard by the loading door noticed me and shook his head like I was causing trouble. I pretended to fix my costume and left the lot. I kept walking toward home. The streets got quieter and more familiar. I started to relax. That was a mistake. A horn honked behind me, and a small cart used by store employees rolled out from behind the building. One of the clowns sat in the back. The cheap wheels squealed louder and louder. The cart moved faster than I expected. I ran again. I cut through another alley and jumped over a tiny wire fence into a yard. A dog barked. Light flicked on inside the house. I apologized quietly, even though nobody heard. The cart tires squeaked on the street outside the fence. I ducked and waited. My breath made little clouds in the cold air. The clowns stopped at the fence and stared into the dark. One of them pressed their face against the wire until the paint smeared. They sniffed like they had my scent. I slid behind a shed and crawled along the grass. None of the houses here had Halloween lights on. Doors locked. Curtains down. Everyone asleep. I slipped between 2 houses and emerged near the park that sits 2 blocks from where I live. The park lights flickered, but they were bright enough to see everything. I felt safer on open ground. I jogged across the field, grass wet and cold on my shoes. My lungs burned. I risked another look. The clowns stood by the park entrance, heads tilted. They watched and waited. They did not chase into the open. Maybe they preferred corners and fences. I got to the far end of the park and crossed the street fast. I finally saw the porch light of my place. My legs felt heavy like I dragged weights. I fumbled with the key. The street behind me was empty. I saw no clowns. I stepped inside and locked the door 3 times. I stood still for a minute and listened. Nothing. Only the hum of the fridge. I dumped my candy and saw a small, twisted balloon animal I never picked up. It had a number written on it in marker. It matched the number printed on some of my candy wrappers. I threw it all in the trash. I washed my hands twice. Next morning, I walked to school. I checked every street. No clowns. But 3 kids did not show up to class. Their seats stayed empty all day. No announcements. No messages. People acted normal. The hall felt colder. I still take different routes home and avoid quiet blocks. Sometimes at night, I hear a squealing balloon noise drifting from far away. I keep my blinds closed. If I go trick-or-treating again, I am going with a full group. I do not walk alone anymore. That Halloween started out cold and boring, the kind of night where your breath turns white the second you talk, and the plastic mask you wear fogs up. I didn't even want to go, but my cousin dragged me along because he said the next neighborhood over gave out big chocolate bars instead of the tiny ones. We figured if we went late, we'd skip the little kids and hit all the houses before they ran out. It was one of those older neighborhoods where every driveway looked cracked and uneven, and most of the porch lights flickered like the bulbs were tired. The air smelled like burned pumpkin from all the candles people stuffed into carved ones. The street was weirdly quiet except for the crunch of our shoes on the gravel. We hit 6 or 7 houses, got a mix of candy, nothing special. Then we reached a small yellow house at the end of the street. The lawn was trimmed short, no decorations, just a single orange porch light. No music, no spider webs, no fog machines, just a chair by the door and a man sitting on it, holding a little notebook on his lap. I remember thinking it felt like a setup for one of those fake haunted houses where someone jumps out. But this guy looked normal, maybe 50, sweater with stripes, calm face. There was a big bowl of candy next to him. He smiled when we walked up like the kind of smile you practice. My cousin said, "Trick or treat," and the man nodded but didn't hand out candy right away. Instead, he pointed at the notebook and asked us what nights our parents worked late. Just like that. No laugh, no joke tone, just asked straight. I froze because I didn't even understand what kind of question that was. My cousin laughed awkwardly and said his parents didn't work late at all. The man read something in his notebook and nodded. He checked the page, compared something, and then dropped 2 full-size candy bars into my cousin's bag. When it was my turn, I said my mom worked evenings at a store sometimes, but my dad was home most nights. He looked at his notebook again, finger running down a column like he was matching something, then gave me 1 candy bar instead of 2. I thought he was just being weird. We walked off, and I started joking that maybe he gave extra candy to kids with parents who stayed home. My cousin said it felt like the guy was keeping track of something, but we shrugged it off. We hit more houses, filled our bags, and forgot about it until we reached another place 3 blocks down. The lady there did the same thing. Asked which nights parents worked late, read a note, checked her notebook, handed out candy based on it. That was the first time I started feeling something wasn't normal. I noticed both of their notebooks looked almost identical. Black cover, worn edges, a rubber band around them. Both people seemed too calm, like they weren't even enjoying Halloween, just collecting data. My cousin said it was probably some neighborhood watch thing, maybe making sure no one left their kids alone. But that didn't explain the way they compared notes before handing candy out. We walked another block and saw 2 older teens coming from the same direction. They said people were asking them questions about parents' work schedules too. One girl said she saw the man at the yellow house writing names. That freaked me out. I hadn't told him my last name, but maybe he knew it somehow. The next house we went to had a Happy Halloween sign made from cardboard. A middle-aged woman came out holding a notepad, and before I could say anything she asked the same question. "What nights do your parents work late?" I hesitated this time. She tapped her pen like she already knew the answer. I said they worked different shifts. She looked annoyed, wrote something, and only gave me a single lollipop. We walked away fast. My cousin said we should go back and ask what they were doing, but I didn't want to. The houses behind us started turning off their porch lights like the night was done, but I noticed all the ones that had asked questions stayed lit. Their lights didn't flicker either. They stayed steady, almost too steady, like they were wired into something different. We reached the main road, and I looked back. The yellow house's porch light was still glowing. I could see the man writing in his notebook even after no more kids were coming. He kept glancing at the street like he was waiting for someone. We decided to cut through the back alley to head home faster. Behind the houses, trash bins lined the fences. One was open, and I saw something inside that made me stop. Pages from notebooks. Torn out pages full of handwriting. It looked like names and addresses. Some had check marks. Some had X. There were notes like Mother Home MBWF and Father Gone After 6 p.m. I grabbed one before my cousin told me to leave it alone. We ran home after that. I couldn't stop thinking about the notebooks. When I got back, my mom was already watching TV. I didn't tell her anything because I didn't want her to think I was making it up. I dumped the candy out on my bed and started sorting through it. About half the wrappers had tiny stickers on them, like color codes. Red, blue, yellow. I'd never seen candy with stickers like that. My cousin said his didn't have any, so maybe they gave different ones based on our answers. I kept the paper from the trash bin. It had 5 names and 4 addresses that matched the street we were on. Each had little notes about which nights people were home. One name was circled with a small drawing next to it that looked like a clock. I tried to ignore it but couldn't sleep. Around midnight, I heard a car engine outside. When I looked through the blinds, I saw the same yellow house man standing on the sidewalk near our driveway, writing something in his notebook. He looked up once, then walked away. Next morning, I showed my cousin the page I found. He wanted to tell someone. We didn't even know who to tell. What do you say? Some random guy's keeping track of our parents' schedules for candy. It sounds stupid. We went back that afternoon to check the alley, but the trash bin was gone. So were all the notebooks. The yellow house had a for rent sign out front. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the names. I looked them up online. 3 of the families listed had recently moved away. The one with the circled name still lived there, but when we biked past, the windows were boarded up and the mailbox was stuffed full of envelopes. Halloween came and went, but about a week later, police cars showed up on that street. No one told us why. My mom said something about a break-in, but it never made the news. I checked every day online. Nothing. A few months later, a new family moved into the yellow house. Kids, normal decorations, no weird questions. But every time I walked home from school, I felt watched, like someone was checking what time I got home. The weirdest part came when I found another piece of notebook paper stuck in our mailbox. No envelope, just a page folded twice with my name written at the top. Inside it said, "Father home by 8," and underneath was a single check mark. I showed my cousin. He looked scared for the first time. We threw it away, but it kept bothering me. I started noticing stickers on my mailbox that weren't there before. Tiny colored dots, same colors as the candy wrappers. Blue one week, red the next. One night, a neighbor we barely knew came by and told my mom someone had been knocking on doors late asking if people worked the nights. My mom said she didn't open the door for strangers. The neighbor said it was a man holding a clipboard. When she described him, it sounded like the yellow house guy. Every few weeks after that, different people moved into the houses that used to give out candy. They never stayed long. Always quiet, always polite, but gone after a few months. One day I saw a truck parked out front with boxes labeled survey equipment. I wanted to look closer, but my cousin pulled me away. Years later, I read an article online about a group caught collecting information from families in small towns. They claimed it was a marketing thing, tracking home presents for delivery routes. No arrests, no names listed. The picture showed stacks of notebooks, same kind as the ones from that Halloween. Now when I trick or treat with younger cousins, I notice which houses ask questions. Some still do. How far did you walk tonight? Do your parents drive you or pick you up? Stuff that sounds harmless but feels rehearsed. I keep answers vague. I don't take candy from people with clipboards or notebooks. Sometimes when I pass the old yellow house, I still see faint light from the upstairs window. A single bulb glowing steady, never flickering. Someone still keeps notes. Hey guys, really sorry to interrupt. If you're still listening, then you're enjoying the story so far. And if you are enjoying, then please hit that like button. That's all I ask of you. Thanks so much. Now back to the stories. Halloween hit different that year because my town switched trick-or-treating hours. They made everyone go earlier while the sun was still out, which ruined half the point. I met up with 2 friends near the park, and we planned to take the long route so we could hit the older houses that gave better candy. The sun dipped fast, though, and the sky went purple behind the trees. Pumpkins with cheap candles flickered on porches, and the grass smelled damp. I remember thinking it was too quiet for how many kids were out. We walked down the first block, filling our bags with the good stuff. Mini bars, gummy packs, a few houses handing out soda cans. It felt normal until we hit this place near the end, a brick house with a front yard full of fake gravestones. There was a guy standing near the walkway in a buttoned coat. He wasn't dressed up. He held a paper cup but didn't drink from it. He waved kids over and smiled like he was hosting a game show. When we got closer, I noticed he wasn't handing out candy right away. Instead, he asked kids if they walked home alone or with their parents. Most kids answered without thinking, because he asked casually like a neighbor just making small talk. Then he asked who had keys to their house. That part felt wrong. He asked if parents trusted them to get inside without adults around. Kids bragged about it, like it made them seem older. Every time someone answered, he'd reach into a bowl and hand out candy based on it. I saw him drop full bars to kids with keys. With kids who didn't, he handed out a loose piece of hard candy and a tiny sticker. My friend nudged me, and we kept our mouths shut. When it was our turn, he asked if we walked home alone. We lied and said our parents would pick us up later. He gave us 2 small chocolates and looked disappointed, scribbling notes on the inside of his paper cup with a tiny pencil. We walked off fast. My friend whispered that the guy's eyes didn't match his smile, like he was more interested in the data than the candy. The street after that didn't feel as safe. A few houses later, another adult asked almost the same questions. Not word for word, but close. Who walks home alone? Who has a key? He compared our answers against a folded sheet in his pocket. He gave my friend a little plastic coin when he said he had a key. The coin looked like a cheap souvenir token, but I noticed a number printed on one side. Later, when I checked my candy bag under the streetlights, I found a coin too. I didn't even remember being handed one. It had a different number. When I rubbed my thumb across it, it left a faint black smear on my skin like old printer ink. My cousin said maybe it was part of some neighborhood scavenger hunt. We didn't see any signs for a prize, though. We cut through 3 more streets, and every block had at least one house with an adult asking about home access. Some marked answers on clipboards. One house had a guy pretending to be friendly, complimenting costumes, then casually asking if we ever got locked out. I kept answering with lies, but I messed up once. I said we had a spare key hidden outside. His eyes lit up like he had just scored points. He tapped his pen twice on his clipboard. The worst house was a white one with a glowing yard full of fake zombies stuck into the grass. The woman there asked the same questions, but she also asked what time we usually got home from school and if our parents got home first or after. Every answer she marked in a column. She handed out candy slow like she was stalling to hear more. I didn't like how she looked at our bags. Her eyes stayed on the coins. We moved faster after that. Streetlights buzzed above us, and the wind blew wrappers across the road. My friend kept looking over at his shoulder. He said he saw someone following us, just far enough back to not be obvious. When I checked, I saw someone walking slow, holding a clipboard, no costume, just staring at house numbers. At the next intersection, we ran into some older teens. We asked if they got weird questions too. They said yeah, but they thought it was some new crime prevention campaign. Except one girl said last year someone asked similar questions, and a few houses got broken into when parents weren't home. Cops never found who did it. We traded a look, and nobody laughed after that. We hit one more block, and I saw the coin again at the bottom of my bag. The number had changed. Before, it was stamped deep. Now the ink looked fresh and thin, like it got overwritten. I rubbed it. More black smear. I wiped it on my sleeve, leaving a dark streak. When we reached the street where I live, the person following us stopped at the corner. They took notes while looking at our houses. Another person joined them and handed over something. I couldn't see what, but it looked like another coin. They compared numbers and nodded. My friend whispered we should go inside fast. We bolted. At home, I dumped all the candy on my floor. Mixed in with the gummies and chocolate was a folded card with a list of weekday times printed on it. Next to Tuesday, there was a small check mark. Next to Thursday, a dot. Those were nights my mom worked late. I felt sick. I tried explaining it to my mom, but she waved it off. She thought someone was tracking candy preferences. She took the card and tossed it. I grabbed it later and kept it hidden in a shoebox. Over the next week, I started seeing tiny check marks on sidewalks near certain houses. Little symbols, arrows, circles, a shape that looked like a door. My friend said one symbol probably meant the kid had a key. Another symbol maybe meant parents got home after dark. We watched from across the street as someone in a hoodie walked house to house, stopping only where the chalk marks were. The next night, police cars patrolled our area. Something happened, but nobody talked. Rumors spread like wildfire. Someone said houses got checked, not robbed, but inspected. Someone else said a kid got followed home from school by a clipboard person. No adults believed it. I found a coin in our mailbox one morning, same number as before. I freaked and threw it in the trash, but when I checked later, it was gone. The trash bag was ripped open from the inside. Halloween faded, but the weirdness didn't stop. Flyers showed up offering home safety consultations. They wanted to check how doors locked, where keys were stored, and what time kids got home. My mom tossed them. Good. One afternoon walking home alone, I saw the first guy from the brick house. He pretended not to notice me. But he glanced at my backpack zipper and smirked. His hand went to his pocket like he was checking for coins. I turned down a different road and did not look back. Winter came, and school buried us in work. Most kids forgot about the questions, but I noticed fewer houses had spare key locks. Parents moved them inside. New locks appeared. Motion lights. My street felt like it was bracing for something. Then one family moved out overnight. No truck, no goodbye. Their house windows stayed dark for weeks. I peeked through the mail slot once. Inside, I saw chalk symbols on the hardwood floor, circles around the rug spots. Drawer markings. They weren't robbed. Someone napped the interior. A month later, police arrested a pair of burglars in the next town. Reports said they targeted homes based on predictable schedules. They found notebooks full of info, which kids walked alone, who had keys when parents were gone. They said the burglars got their info by tricking kids during holidays. It never named Halloween, but I knew. The report said they weren't working alone. 2 others got away. Their notebooks were missing. Their coins were missing. Their chalk maps were missing. Summer arrived. Kids relaxed. But small things stayed wrong. Sometimes I noticed chalk under my porch. Sometimes a coin sits near the door, then disappears by morning. A neighbor swears she sees someone across the street at 3 a.m. writing down house numbers. Nobody believes her. I keep my key on a chain now and never talk about schedules. When kids brag about having house access, I tell them to stop. I don't explain. They'd laugh. Last Halloween, I walked with a huge group. Safety in numbers, right? But at the edge of the neighborhood, I saw one house with no decorations and one man sitting with a notebook. Same coat. Same smile. He waved a kid over and asked who walked home alone. The kid answered. He scribbled. He handed out candy slow and stared at door locks instead of costumes. I turned away and kept walking. When I got home, a coin sat on my porch. Fresh ink. Same number as before. I kicked it into the street and shut the door. It rolled to the curb and stopped. Someone picked it up. I never thought a quiet cul-de-sac could feel crowded, but Halloween has a way of squeezing too many people into a single loop of cracked sidewalks and cheap porch lights. That night, I went out late because I was stuck helping my dad hand out candy early on. By the time I grabbed my costume and met up with my group, the street vibe felt different. Fewer toddlers, more middle schoolers, and that weird electric feeling in the air like the night was waiting to jump. We cut through 3 blocks fast, loading our bags. The houses in that area were old, but lived in. You could tell which ones recently got new siding and which ones should have. Pumpkins sat by doorsteps, some already sagging from rot. The wind picked up wrappers and dragged them across lawns. Parents trailed behind groups like nervous security guards. We were talking trash about who got the least candy when one of my friends pointed at a house we hadn't seen before. It sat on the corner, dark except for a bright table set up under a string of orange bowls. A smiling woman sat behind the table with full bags of candy stacked like bricks. I mean, actual bags still sealed from the store. More than 50 of them. That wasn't normal. Kids swarmed her, and she handed bags out like she was running a contest. Every time someone walked away with one, she wrote something down. The pile was shrinking fast. My friend elbowed me, and we made our way over. It wasn't until we got close that I heard what she was asking. She wasn't saying trick or treat. She wasn't complimenting costumes. She was asking which houses had motion cameras on this street and the next. Not doorbells. Not decorations. Cameras. She asked kids which ones pointed toward the sidewalk, which ones beeped when you passed, which ones blinked. Kids answered like they were bragging about knowing the neighborhood. She rewarded them with huge bags. When it was my turn and I kept my face flat and lied, I said my block barely had cameras. She stared at me way too long, like she could tell I knew more. She reached for a small bag instead of the big sealed ones and dropped it in my hands. It felt almost empty. She glanced at my friends. One of them spilled directions instantly. He pointed down the block, listing houses one by one, mentioning which ones had bright LED doorbells or motion sensors. The woman smiled, marked something in her notebook, then handed him 2 full bags. He grinned like he won the lottery. Right then I noticed something off. Every kid who answered got a colored sticker on the corner of their candy bag, red, green, or blue. I watched pattern after pattern. Kids who named lots of camera houses got blue stickers. Those who knew nothing got red. Kids who lied and she believed it got green. I got green. My friend got blue. She made sure to press the sticker down hard whenever she handed a bag over. We walked away, and I told my friend he shouldn't have said all that. He shrugged. Free candy, right? We hit more houses. But after a few minutes, we realized we were seeing the same stickers on bags from different corners of town. Kids with blue stickers got nodded at by certain adults handing out candy. Kids with red stickers got almost ignored. Kids with green stickers got quick glances at their backpacks. The wind rattled the leaves overhead, and the street lights buzzed. At one corner, a man handed out apples and checked the bag stickers before dropping anything in. When he saw my green, he hesitated and scribbled something on a sheet tucked under the bowl. He didn't do that to my friend. He just smiled, gave him a candy bar, and nodded. We kept walking, but the crowd thinned and the night darkened. My bag rustled with every step. I checked the sticker corner, trying to peel it, but it felt stuck like it melted into the plastic. My friend said I was overthinking. I wasn't so sure. At the next house, a guy stood near the garage pretending to be fixing decorations. He didn't hand out candy. He watched people pass. When someone with a blue sticker bag walked by, he whispered something into a tiny mic clipped to his sleeve. When the kid with a red sticker passed, he didn't say a thing. When I passed with green, he tilted his head and stared at the zip around my hoodie. My neck prickled. We hit a street that barely had any kids left. Most porch lights went dark. The trees overhead blocked moonlight, and our shadows stretched across cracked concrete. My friend said we should head home soon, but I wanted to watch the woman at the corner house again. We backtracked. By the time we returned, her pile had shrunk to only a few bags. She talked to a group of older teens. They pulled out their phones and pointed at houses farther away. She wrote everything down, quick and neat. One of the teens refused to answer. She smiled politely and slid a red sticker onto his candy bag anyway. As we passed behind the table, I saw her notebook. It had columns labeled with street names and camera types. Under certain houses, she drew arrows. Some arrows pointed away from the street, like plotting blind spots. Some boxes were circled. A few names were underlined. One name had 3 stars next to it. I recognized that house. It belonged to a family who just installed a security system. A cold chill ran through me even though the night wasn't freezing. We walked away again. My friend stopped to trade candy with someone. When he reached into his bag, I noticed the blue sticker corner had a tiny symbol printed on it. A star inside a circle. I showed him. He said mine had different marking, a triangle printed so faint you had to angle it to see. His eyes widened. Then we noticed something worse. Down the block, adults in dull jackets stood on opposite corners. They didn't carry candy bowls. They watched sticker corners. When a kid passed with blue, they followed from far back. With red stickers, they ignored. With green, they watched from across the street, writing notes on their phones. We tried to convince ourselves they were just neighborhood watch volunteers. But neighborhood watch doesn't scan backpack zippers with their eyes, or check shoe brands, or map camera placements. We kept moving, cutting through alleys and side yards. One house's motion light flashed on when we passed. Instantly, from somewhere behind us, someone murmured into a handheld radio. We ducked behind shrubs until the light faded. My heart pounded. We made it to my block. Porch lights glowed like tiny safe zones. Parents waved from driveways. Nothing looked wrong. But when we reached my driveway, I saw a blue chalk mark near the curb. I never saw chalk there before. It matched a shape printed faintly on my friend's sticker. He looked at it, then at me. We didn't talk. I went inside and dumped my candy across the floor. I peeled off the green sticker corner with scissors. There was a tiny strip of metal glued underneath, like a tag. It buzzed faintly when I held it near my phone. I grabbed tweezers and yanked it off. Underneath the plastic smelled like burning string, and I felt dizzy for a second. My friend texted 5 minutes later. He found a strip under his too. His dad smashed it flat with pliers. It sparked. A week passed. People forgot about candy. But late at night, vans parked on certain corners. Only outside houses kids had listed. It sat with lights off. One had a ladder strapped to the roof. Another had bolt cutters hanging on a hook inside. I watched through blinds, breathing slow. The newspaper Two Towns overran a small article about attempted break-ins. Homes targeted had new cameras. Motion sensors disabled. Nobody caught anyone. We kept checking our neighborhood. The chalk marks grew. They spread the code only some adults could read. Arrows pointed at dark yards. Dots marked fences with broken boards. X marked where porch lights stayed off. The corner woman never came back. That house remained empty. But every so often, someone put a small table out front with a single stickered candy bag on top. Different sticker each time. Blue, red, green. The bag disappeared by morning. Kids don't talk about it anymore. But when Halloween rolls around, parents stand closer, watch more, trust less. Hundreds of tiny stickers crinkle across candy bags, and nobody knows their maps. I keep all my candy loose now. No bags, no stickers, no tags. If someone offers a full bag for free, I walk away, even if it's stacked like treasure. I always thought Halloween in our neighborhood was pretty normal. Same houses with fake cobwebs, same cheap plastic pumpkins on front steps, same parents walking way too slow behind everyone. But this one year felt way busier than any other, like every house on every street was buzzing. I was out with some friends, all of us wearing dumb costumes we threw together last minute, and we were only really out for the candy and have something to brag about at school the next day. We started early because we wanted to beat the crowds, but it did not work. Everyone had the same idea, and the streets looked like some type of festival. I remember feeling a little bored at first, thinking it would be just another long walk with pockets full of sugar. As we moved from house to house, I noticed this one neighbor standing on his driveway holding a clipboard against his hip. I did not think much of it. Maybe he was decorating or doing some kind of community list. He looked friendly and kept pointing out costumes and nodding like he really cared. He smiled at everyone and acted like he was impressed. Every time a group left a door and walked away, he glanced down and scribbled stuff. I assumed he was judging costumes for some contest. I figured adults always find weird ways to keep busy on nights like that. My group did not even talk about him. We just went straight for the houses with the biggest bowls. After a while, we looped down another street. The same guy reappeared at the corner like he teleported. He leaned on a fence with his clipboard. When we passed by, he looked at my costume and nodded, then asked some grown-up sounding question without talking. I could tell he was thinking something, but I did not know what. He jotted something down again. He moved away quick, blending into the flow of parents and groups passing between houses. I still thought it was nothing. We went on with our route, planning which houses had the good chocolate, and which ones gave out toothbrushes or raisins like some type of punishment for being a kid. Later, toward the middle of the night, I stopped noticing the decorations and lights. They all blurred together. I just kept stuffing candy into a bag that was getting heavier. Somewhere behind us, I caught a glimpse of the clipboard guy again. This time he was leaning against a tree, watching people move back towards certain houses. I saw him stare at the groups who doubled back because they missed a porch. He scribbled so fast his hand looked like it was shaking. I did not get it. We joked that maybe he was writing fan fiction about costumes or planning some weird ranking that nobody would care about. We were stupid. None of us thought anyone could be weird enough to track where kids went twice. About halfway through, my friend's bag ripped, so we spent time trying to fix it. The crowd thinned and most of the younger kids were already heading home. Windows glowed with the soft colors of TV screens, and porch lights started shutting off one by one. When we headed back toward my street, we took a different route than earlier. That is when we saw him again, at the end of a driveway. He was pretending to compliment costumes without talking like he did before, but his eyes were dead serious. He waited for groups to head back to houses they already visited earlier in the night. Every time, he wrote something. He tracked which houses kids returned to, like he was mapping patterns. A pit formed in my stomach for the first time, mostly confusion, but also a chill that made me slow down. I wondered if he was some type of committee person watching which houses were too generous or something. Maybe the neighborhood wanted to even out candy or cut down on kids getting greedy. But he did not stop writing. He watched our street like someone planning a route. I kept thinking about how some families go out then come back for coats or bathroom breaks. Maybe he was building a list of which houses had kids returning without parents. And then it clicked in my head that if you read that data the wrong way, it could tell you who was home, who would be away later, and who might trust kids to come back at night without adults watching. I told myself I was just being paranoid. I did not want to sound dramatic in front of friends. Eventually, we got back to my driveway and dumped our candy on the garage floor. We sorted through it, trading pieces and laughing at the cheap stuff that always makes its way into bags. I thought the night was over. I almost forgot about the clipboard neighbor. When my friends left, I headed upstairs. I looked out my bedroom window and saw the guy still walking the sidewalk. He stopped in front of a house known for leaving their porch light on late. He wrote a lot on his clipboard. Then he walked on. Something about the way he looked around made me feel like he was scouting. I turned off my light and pretended it was fine. The next morning, the street felt too quiet. A few parents talked out in front of houses like they were confused. I heard someone mention missing decorations, and one house reported their shed door unlocked. I never heard anything about stolen candy or broken stuff, but little things went missing. I tried not to connect it. Kids get blamed for everything. Maybe random teens did it, but the clipboard neighbor was not outside. He did not show up at the community meeting that weekend. People asked about him, but only a few even knew his name. All I remembered was his handwriting looked like rushed lines and loops. Weeks passed, and we started hearing rumors. Some houses said they noticed someone walking around late at night after Halloween. Small garden tools disappeared, small mail packages vanished, and a bike got taken from a porch. None of it sounded big enough to panic about, but when you line them up, it starts to paint something. I thought about the houses we saw kids return to more than once. Those are houses where parents trusted the neighborhood, houses where kids wandered back without supervision. Easy targets. I thought about telling an adult, but I felt dumb. Who would listen to a teenager talking about a clipboard guy scribbling notes about candy routes? Months later, a new family moved into the clipboard guy's house. They said they'd bought it cheap because the previous owner left town suddenly. They never met him. Boxes sat untouched in the attic, labeled with boring stuff like seasonal lights and gardening tools. But the weird part was someone found a list in the boxes. Names of houses written in rows. Some marked with little stars. Some with circles. Some highlighted. Nobody could figure out the pattern. They brushed it off as maybe something to do with a survey. I did not say anything. I just stared at it and felt sick because I recognized the pattern of streets. It was the exact path we all walked on Halloween night. The new family threw the paper away like trash. Nobody cared. When spring came, some houses got broken into during school days. Only small items went missing. A few parents whispered about common patterns. Houses where kids return after sundown on Halloween. Houses where the parents let them roam. I stopped going trick or treating after that year. It was not fear. It was something else. Looking back at a snapshot of the moment, I should have paid attention. The clipboard neighbor moved quietly, watched patterns, memorized habits. Adults think kids are loud and distracted, but we see more than they think. Every now and then I read online about people tracking their neighborhoods through small routines. Learning when someone leaves for work. Learning which windows stay open. It takes time. Halloween gave the clipboard neighbor a perfect cover. Kids everywhere. Doors opening nonstop. Parents busy with candy. Nobody looks twice at a guy complimenting costumes. Nobody asks why he watches which houses get visits twice. I have this memory stuck in my head of his shoes tapping on the sidewalk. Not rushed. Just steady, patient steps, like someone playing a long game. He did not need to run. He only needed to watch. Nobody ever questioned him because Halloween feels safe. I think about it sometimes when I walk home after dark. How easy it was to follow us without talking. How easy it was to map the flow of a neighborhood. The next Halloween, I stayed inside. I watched from my window as kids paraded down the street. Some groups doubled back the houses they forgot. Porch lights flickered, and parents chatted on sidewalks. I saw a new adult standing on the corner holding something in his hand. Maybe a phone, maybe a notebook. He nodded at costumes, eyes scanning the crowd. I could not see if he wrote anything, but he watched patterns. After that, I stopped watching. I turned my light off. Halloween that year started out weird before I even made it off my street. I was not planning on going all out or anything. I just wanted free candy and to walk with a couple friends so we did not look like losers staying home. The air felt thick, like the neighborhood carried some kind of secret nobody wanted to say out loud. The houses looked mostly normal, except a few people went too hard on decorations. Some yards had plastic skeletons stacked like firewood, and one house had a fog machine that made everyone cough. Parents laughed about it, but it felt off to me. I kept thinking about how everyone acts like Halloween is harmless, but nobody sees how badly people want control over little things. My costume was lazy. I grabbed an old jacket, a mask that barely fit, and taped some fake stuff on. My backpack was just a backpack, nothing special. We walked past houses getting mobbed by tiny kids who could not even hold their candy bags straight. I kept staring at the adults. Most acted bored, just on their phones or holding mugs of whatever hot drink adults pretend to enjoy. The street lights flickered, and kids ran from house to house like a swarm. We joined in. I filled my backpack fast because I was not carrying some flimsy plastic bag this time. I wanted to be efficient. Somewhere around the midpoint of our walk, we reached this one porch. Nothing special from the outside. Plain lights, mooring decorations, and a bowl that looked half empty already. I walked up thinking we would get a few pieces, say thanks, and move on. But the adult standing there watched us approach like a security guard. His eyes followed every movement. He asked us to open our backpacks. Not with words, more like a gesture and a look you could not say no to. I felt stupid standing there unzipping my pack so he could see inside. He looked between the wrappers and small candies like he was sorting data in his head. He stared hard enough to make my skin crawl. I kept thinking maybe he worked at the school or something and recognized troublemakers. But he never spoke. After a moment, he reached behind him and pulled out something wrapped in brown paper. Maybe the size of a small lunchbox, taped tight. He handed it toward me like it belonged in my bag. I felt frozen. He did not explain what it was. We all knew it was wrong, but the worst part was how everyone behind us just waited quietly like this was normal. I shook my head and stepped back. He seemed annoyed but not surprised. Then he tried with my friend, holding the package close like a dare. My friend backed away. The man put the package back on a small stool behind him and looked at us like we wasted his time. I expected him to react more, maybe yell or call someone. Instead, he gestured again for us to open our backpacks wider. He stared at each pocket. My hands felt sweaty, and the straps dug into my shoulders. I realized this house was not about candy. This was about checking what kids carried. Maybe he wanted to see electronics, house keys, tools, anything that told him something about where we lived or what we could access. He waved us off like we were uninteresting. We left the porch fast. I kept feeling like maybe I should dump all the candy out and run home. We walked down the driveway and pretended to laugh, but none of it was real. I kept glancing back. He was still standing on that porch, not giving candy to the next kids, just scanning backpacks, handing the package to anyone he thought might take it. Some kids actually walked away with it. I wondered if they even asked what it was. Nobody likes to admit when something feels wrong because then you cannot ignore it anymore. We stayed quiet. The night kept going, but everything felt heavier after that. Every house looked like a checkpoint. I kept seeing adults at porches staring too quietly into kids' bags. One woman held a flashlight and studied candy like she was doing quality control. Parents laughed it off, but I saw her write something on a sheet hidden behind her candy bowl. When dusk settled deeper, the younger kids disappeared. The older teens came out. Everyone acted tougher, but the fear sat in my stomach. I kept thinking about that package. What was inside? Why he wanted kids to carry it. I thought maybe it was some prank, but it felt serious. Eventually, we sat on a curb to rest. My backpack weighed a ton. I took it off and stared at it like it could betray me. I wondered if anyone else noticed house patterns. Some porches acted like they cared too much about what kids carried. Why would an adult want to see the inside of a random teenager's bag on Halloween? My friend said maybe they just wanted to check for rotten apples or something stupid. But the look in that man's eyes said something else, something calculating. We kept walking. The neighborhood started calming down. Porch lights switched off like falling dominoes. Kids cleared out, leaving wrappers blown across lawns. I felt watched. Not by the classic horror monster stuff. More like someone measuring the flow of kids. Learning routes. Figuring out who carries valuables, medicine, keys. Backpacks hold personal info. It was like a survey disguised as a celebration. When I got home and dumped everything out, I dug through the pile, hunting for anything weird. Nothing jumped out. Just candy, wrappers, and a couple plastic toys. I checked the bag for tags or tracking stickers. Paranoid maybe, but I did not care. I slept bad. I had nightmares of being stopped on every porch, forced to show everything I own. No candy, just inspections. In the weeks after Halloween, weird stories surfaced. A couple houses said packages showed up at their door without return addresses. Some kids bragged they delivered things to random houses because a man gave them $5 to do it. Parents thought it was harmless, like a scavenger game. I did not. One house got police cars outside for a whole afternoon. Nobody explained why. They just took something from the porch and left. People whispered, but nobody confronted anything. Sometimes I passed that porch walking home from school. Nothing special in daylight. Just a boring house with peeling paint. I tried to imagine that man standing there again, motioning for backpacks. I thought about asking my parents, but adults always think teens exaggerate. They would say I read too many scary stories online. Months later at school, we got a warning about kids transporting suspicious items. They told us not to accept packages from strangers. Everyone laughed because the warning felt late. Nobody mentioned Halloween. It felt like the adults wanted to pretend it did not happen, like they wanted it to fade. I never saw that man again. His house stayed dark most nights. I walked faster past it. One time I saw boxes stacked near his door. Maybe deliveries. Maybe pickups. I could not tell. The neighborhood acted normal again, but I swear something shifted. People looked at backpacks differently, checking them at parties, sports games, and other events. Suspicion spread like fog. The next Halloween, I thought about staying home, but my friends convinced me to go. When we reached that same house, the porch was empty. No bull, no decorations, just a locked door and dead grass. We kept walking, pretending we did not remember. Sometimes when I open my backpack at school, I think about how easy it would be to slip something inside without anyone noticing. How a holiday about costumes and candy can turn into a map of what kids carry. Adults hide intentions behind nice smiles. You never know which porch is harmless and which porch is collecting data. I learned something boring but true. Not every weird moment becomes a headline. Sometimes it just floats around a neighborhood, untouched, never solved, and quietly ongoing. I guess that is Halloween. You think you are collecting candy. Sometimes it is collecting you. I did not even want to go out that Halloween. I had homework, my phone was dying, and I was tired from staying up way too late the night before. But everyone kept calling me boring and said I would regret missing out, so I threw on some random costume parts from a storage bin in the garage. I did not care how I looked. I just wanted to get it over with, grab enough candy to last the week, then head straight home. When I stepped outside, the air felt colder than normal, almost like the wind carried whispers down the street. Nothing supernatural, just that feeling you get when a neighborhood changes without anybody talking about it. My street was packed. Cars lined both sides, headlights cutting across lawns, parents yelling at kids to slow down. I walked with two friends along the sidewalk, avoiding the tiny kids sprinting like they were late for school. I did not plan on staying out long. Just hit the houses known for big candy bars and skipped the boring ones. Music blasted from one yard, and someone had a smoke machine fogging up everything so bad people were tripping on the curb. We laughed at some costumes that looked like they took hours to put together. Mine felt like trash compared to them. We worked our way deeper into the neighborhood where the houses get bigger and the lawns perfectly cut. These houses always hand out the best stuff. One house offered hot chocolate, another gave glow sticks. Parents crowded around like it was a mini event. We kept moving fast, bags growing heavy. My shoulders already hurt from the straps. My friends were talking about some party happening later, but I did not feel like partying. I just wanted candy and sleep. After about an hour, we noticed fewer houses had lights on. Some porches were completely dark, bowls empty. Younger kids faded away because parents had early bedtimes to deal with. We followed a trail of flickering jack-o'-lanterns until we reached a house I never really noticed before. It looked normal enough. One plastic ghost in the yard, a couple small pumpkins, and a dull orange porch light. An older guy stood behind a table with bowls of candy laid out in a neat line. He waved us over without smiling. We grabbed a few pieces and started to walk away, but the man leaned forward and said something quietly. I could not hear him at first, but I saw his mouth move. He pointed at us and then pointed back toward his porch. He made a motion like we should come back later. He tapped his wrist like a clock, then gestured down the street as if telling us to wait until our parents were gone. I felt this weird knot in my stomach. My friends just shrugged and kept walking, joking about secret Halloween challenges. Maybe he wanted to give out the good stuff after curfew. Down the block, other teenagers talked about the same guy. Apparently, he told a bunch of them to return without parents for a bonus round. Some thought it was some crazy game adults set up once in a while. They hyped it up like there would be giant candy bars or maybe even cash. My friends wanted to check it out. I did not. The idea of going back to some dude's porch late at night felt creepy, but nobody listened to me. Peer pressure is annoying. When we finished our normal route, we circled back near that house. We hung around the corner, watching other kids walk up to the porch. The older man did not hand out candy right away. He pulled out a small notebook and wrote something before giving them a bag. Some kids came back giggling like they scored something huge. Others kept quiet and hurried away. That made the knot in my stomach get tighter. I asked my friends if we could bail, but they rolled their eyes. We waited. I remember the sky getting darker and most porch lights switching off. The neighborhood turned quieter like someone lowered the volume. Eventually, it was our turn. We walked up the driveway trying to look confident. The man's eyes scanned us in this slow, sharp way. He reached into a plastic bin and pulled out small black bags tied shut. He handed one to each of us. Suddenly, we were holding mystery bags without knowing what was inside. I wanted to open mine right there, but he gestured no. He pointed down the street again and tapped his wrist. It felt like instructions we did not understand. He wrote something in his notebook and stared at us while we left. We walked fast, not talking until we turned the corner. When we were far enough away, we opened the bags. Inside were candies, but also tiny paper slips with house addresses written on them. Just addresses. My friends joked it must be some scavenger hunt. I did not laugh. There was a list too with checkboxes next to house numbers. No explanation. Just the numbers of houses around our neighborhood. Some of them I recognized. Different streets, different blocks. I imagined people marking data like a map, learning where kids would live, which houses had easy access, which doors stayed unlocked. I shoved it back in the bag before my brain spiraled more. We saw another group of teens run by holding the same black bags. One kid ripped his sheet to pieces and tossed it in the street. That made me feel less crazy. Something about adults handing out information quietly on Halloween felt wrong. We all split up after that. I rushed home before anyone could spot me carrying something weird. When I got inside, I dumped the contents on my floor. I threw most of the candy into a pile and held the sheet in my hands. The handwriting was messy, like he filled it out fast. Next to some addresses were check marks. Next to others were blank spots. I read it again and again, trying to make sense of it. Maybe he wanted teenagers to report something about those houses. Maybe it was something sketchy that had nothing to do with candy. I almost threw it away, but something in me held back. I folded it and hid it inside a notebook on my shelf. I could not sleep that night. I kept hearing footsteps in my head like somebody walking past my window. Nothing happened, but my brain kept replaying the man's silent gestures. The next morning, I walked past that house. The porch was cleared. No decorations, no bowls. The table was gone too. It looked like nothing happened at all. Weeks went by and people started whispering about weird visits at night. Parents mentioned someone knocking and then leaving instantly when nobody answered. Small items went missing from porches. Tiny stuff like gardening gloves or bike locks. Nothing big enough to start panic. I thought about that notebook the man wrote in. All those check marks. It felt like he was logging something. What he collected or who he gave black bags to. I wondered if those addresses were places he planned to visit later. Halloween disguised patterns pretty well. Everyone opens their door without thinking. Months passed and the neighborhood calmed down. Nothing huge happened. No dramatic news stories. But once in a while I saw a car crawl slow down our street at night. Not speeding, just rolling. The kind of movement that means whoever is inside is watching. This Halloween is coming again soon. My friends are hyped up as usual, planning costumes and routes. They say last year was just some weird dude trying to be funny. They want to go back. I told them I might skip. They called me boring again. Maybe I am. But when someone tells groups of kids to come back alone for a bonus round, you do not forget their face. You do not forget the quiet way they watch. Sometimes I take the folded sheet out and stare at those addresses. Some houses now have cameras. Some got new locks. Some families moved. Patterns change. But the idea stays stuck in my head. Someone used a holiday as a cover to take notes on the whole neighborhood. I tossed the sheet back in the notebook and shut it. I do not care about candy anymore. Halloween used to be fun. Now it feels like something watching behind smiles. I was never big on Halloween, but I liked walking around at night with everyone else. Something about seeing the whole neighborhood outside made things feel less boring. That year, I did not even plan a costume. I just threw on a hoodie and painted my face with stuff I found in a drawer. I figured nobody cared. I met up with some friends near the corner store, and we headed into the nicer streets where the houses spaced out more and the trees hung low over the sidewalks. The sky looked weird, kind of orange from all the porch lights blending together. People everywhere. The usual chaos. The first few houses were normal, boring candy. Lots of parents standing around talking too loud. Some adults had huge buckets like they were prepared for an invasion. Others dipped their hands into tiny bowls like they were afraid of running out. The little kids ran ahead, adults dragging behind them like anchors. My group broke off into smaller clusters. I walked near this kid from my school who kept bragging about how much candy he planned to get. I ignored him mostly. I just like to move house to house at a good pace. About 20 minutes and I noticed this one adult walking behind groups, but not in an apparent way. No stroller, no mug, no candy bag, just wandering. Put up, hands in pockets, eyes moving from house to house. People barely looked at him. Kids do not pay attention to adults unless they yell. He would drift close to groups, listen, then drift away again. I thought maybe he was waiting for someone. We got to a block with a ton of decorations. Giant fake spiders on the roof, a wagon full of pumpkins, even cardboard coffins lined up on the lawn. Kids loved it. Parents pretended not to be impressed. I focused on the candy bowl like usual. When we stepped back onto the sidewalk, the weird adult reappeared next to us. He asked questions, but not like small talk. He wanted to know which houses leave windows unlocked to get fresh air at night. He did not sound nosy. More like he was collecting information. Kids answered without thinking. They bragged their parents always left windows cracked because they trusted the neighborhood. It felt wrong hearing them say that. I kept my mouth shut. The adult nodded like he was adding pieces together in his mind. He drifted to the next group and asked the same thing. Some kids answered fast, like they thought he was making conversation. Others shrugged. I watched him move down the sidewalk, blending into crowds of costumes. I pretended not to care, but the question stuck in my head. We kept moving. Houses blurred together. My candy bag got heavier. I shoved random snacks into my pockets because the straps dug into my shoulders. My friends joked about how much sugar they would eat when they got home. They did not notice the weird adult keep reappearing. Every few houses he showed up again, walking behind groups. He asked older kids first. Sometimes he asked parents too. Nobody reacted. I never heard anyone say it was weird. That bothered me more than anything. Around the middle of the night, the youngest kids went home. The crowd thinned, which made it easier to see who followed who. The weird adult stayed near the edges of groups, writing something on a folded paper. Not a clipboard, just a scrap of notebook paper. He wrote small, quick notes, glancing from house to house. If anyone looked directly at him, he shifted to another group. I wondered if I should tell an adult, but then I pictured trying to explain it. Nobody would care. We reached a cul-de-sac where several houses had crazy displays. Zombies in the yard, glowing skeletons hanging from trees. I walked slow because my legs hurt. While I stood around waiting for my friends, the weird adult stopped a group of younger teenagers nearby. He asked them the same window question. They laughed and pointed to houses across the street, bragging which ones never lock windows because of good breeze or because the parents forget. They thought it was funny. The adult nodded and scribbled more notes. I felt sick watching it happen so easily. We moved on. Porch lights started shutting off one at a time. My bag felt like a brick. The wind picked up, and music from a party echoed down the street. I saw the weird adult again near a stop sign. He stared at the second floors of houses like he was counting windows. He wrote something again, then stuffed his paper into his pocket and walked away slowly. Not rushed, just steady. We hit a dead-end street and decided to cut through a connecting alley to save time. The alley smelled like trash and wet leaves. Shadows stretched weird along the ground. Halfway through, I looked back and saw the weird adult standing at the entrance of the alley. He was far enough away that I could pretend I did not see him. He watched us, then walked away casually. I felt goosebumps but ignored them. When I finally got home, My parents were still handing out candy. I dumped my bag on the living room floor. Candy scattered everywhere. I tried to enjoy the moment, but all I could think about was windows. I walked upstairs and checked my own window. Locked. My brother's window. Locked. Downstairs kitchen window. Locked. I looked out into the street. Hundreds of windows visible from my house, some dark, some glowing with tib light, some cracked open slightly. The thought burned into my brain that someone could learn the pattern just by asking the right kids at the right time. Nothing happened that night. I fell asleep around midnight. The next morning, everything seemed normal, until my neighbor complained that someone had tried to lift his window in the night. Just scratches. Maybe raccoons. But it felt too timed. Another parent said they found footprints on their side yard near a window that was left cracked. Nobody said the word break in. They made excuses. Weather. Animals. Kids playing pranks. The weird adult never showed again after Halloween. At least not where I could see him. But over the next few weeks, people gossiped quietly about missing garden tools, stolen headphones, and a phone charger gone from a windowsill. Small annoyances. Nothing worth calling police. People shrugged it off. They trusted the neighborhood too much to believe something bigger. My friends forgot about him instantly. They cared more about finishing their candy. I could not forget. Whenever I walked home from school, I looked up at windows. Some families left theirs slightly open for air. Some kids bragged about how safe their street was. I wondered if someone was mapping the weak spots. Someone who collected data when everyone was distracted by costumes and sugar. Months passed. Winter came. Windows stayed closed. Everything went quiet. When spring arrived, people opened windows again. Kids did homework on their beds with fresh air blowing in. I watched shadows move near houses when I walked home at dusk. Probably nothing, but I noticed everything now. As Halloween came around the next year, neighborhood chat groups told parents not to answer strange questions. Adults shrugged and laughed at the message like it was overkill. Nobody likes believing something creepy happened last year. They just want candy and fun again. I think about the weird adult sometimes, his slow steps, his calm voice, his interest in windows. Locked windows are boring. Cracked windows mean access. Patterns. Halloween gives strangers cover to ask questions nobody would allow any other night. I do not answer questions from adults now. I keep my windows locked. My dad installed little latches you can only open from inside. Maybe I am just paranoid. Maybe nothing was ever planned. But when someone drifts through crowds collecting quiet details, they usually come back later. I always thought our neighborhood acted too proud on Halloween, like everyone wanted to prove they were friendlier or more creative than the next street over. That year felt extra loud. Glowing lights on every porch, kids sprinting everywhere, and adults clustered in driveways like they were hosting secret meetings. I went out with a couple kids from school because staying home felt lame. My costume was lazy. Just a hat and some makeup I smeared on in a rush. I barely cared. I stuffed an old backpack with candy as fast as I could. I planned to bail early and go home to watch videos by myself. As we moved house to house, things felt normal. Weird decorations, loud music, cheap props. Some parents hung back behind their kids like usual. I hardly noticed anything strange at first. I was more focused on not stepping on random toddlers running around like loose shopping carts. My friends kept yelling about which houses had the full-size bars. The rich houses always flexed for attention. The rest of us were just hungry. After maybe 30 minutes, I noticed something off that I almost ignored. A lady on a porch handed out candy while holding a small marker in her hand. She made a tiny mark on the side of candy bags after kids grabbed their treats. It was small, barely even visible. She did it fast, almost like tapping. My friend did not care. He said maybe she was marking winners for some raffle. But she never smiled. She acted focused, scanning the crowd like she needed to remember faces. I checked my bag and found the faint mark near the top seam. A tiny red shape, almost like a dash. I brushed it off. But 2 houses later, another adult did the same thing. He held his candy bowl in one hand and used the other to tap our bags with a different marker. A tiny blue dot. He did it quietly, almost bored. Nobody asked questions. People were too busy shoving chocolate into their mouths. It felt like some pattern, but nobody else paid attention. The marks were subtle, hidden under shadows and crinkled plastic. The next street had a totally different vibe. Houses were spaced wider. Older teens hung around the corners. As we approached another porch, I saw a man watching us with a clipboard tucked under his arm. He handed us candy, then flicked a tiny sticker onto one kid's bag. Not flashy, just a small dot the color of dried leaves. I felt uneasy. These marks added up. I whispered to my friend about it. He laughed like I was paranoid. He joked that adults were probably bored and making games to keep the night interesting. I kept thinking about how adults love pretending they are harmless until you actually look at what they do. The stickers and marks felt like labeling. New families, returning kids, repeat visitors. Something about the way they watched our reactions felt wrong. The crowd thinned. Younger kids went home. Porch lights started dying out. Candy bowls emptied. We reached a part of the neighborhood where the houses looked newer. Different paint colors, fresh landscaping. That was when things made sense in the worst way. On one porch, two older women stood whispering. They marked bags only from kids they did not recognize. I watched the pattern. Kids from families that moved here recently got large circles drawn on their bags. Kids from older families got no mark. I saw the difference instantly. My neighborhood liked to act friendly, but newcomers always felt outside the circle. Adults literally marked the bags of new families, like tagging them. Identifying who lived where, who arrived recently, who might not know the rules. I watched silently as a little kid from the next block got a huge scribble on his bag. He smiled, not noticing. He ran off to join his parents. The women scribbled notes on a pad. They kept track of who stopped by and who left early. Nobody asked why. I tried to keep walking, but curiosity ate me alive. At the next house, the man handing out candy stared at us for a second too long. He nodded at the marks on our bags like he recognized them. Then he checked something on a sheet taped behind his bowl. My friend shrugged and grabbed candy, but I froze. It felt like we were being sorted. I imagined some map with colors drawn on it. Houses labeled by bag marks. Patterns woven through streets. New families tracked. Older families ignored. Like data collection disguised as holiday fun. We kept going, but I could not stop checking my bag. I had 3 different marks now. Red, blue, and a faint orange sticker. I wondered if adults could tell if you were new to town just by looking. I heard my parents complain sometimes about newer neighbors never waving or raking leaves on time. Maybe adults did not like change. Maybe they needed a way to track who belonged. We rested at the curb for a while. I watched adults linger behind fences, whispering to each other while pointing at marked bags. The way their eyes flicked around reminded me of teachers checking attendance. My friend told me to relax. He said it was probably some dumb neighborhood tradition, but nobody ever told us. No flyers, no announcements, just quiet tagging. As the night got colder, I noticed fewer marked happening. Only certain porches did it. Only certain adults. Each one had tired eyes, but focused movements. They looked at our faces first, then our bags, then their notes. Maybe they wanted to know who would live here long term, or who traveled in groups, or which kids returned twice. I started to picture future lists. Parents deciding who to trust based on colored dots from Halloween night. The idea made my stomach churn. When I finally went home, I tossed my bag on the kitchen table and dumped everything out. I took scissors and cut off the pieces that had marks but realized too late that the ink probably already stained through. I dug around for any hidden tags. Nothing else. Just that uneasy feeling stuck under my skin. My mom asked why I looked tired. I said my feet hurt. She nodded and went back to sorting mail. Adults rarely see the things kids notice. The next weekend, my parents went to a neighborhood meeting. They came home annoyed, mumbling about how some families needed to be more involved. They mentioned monitoring participation, attendance, involvement in events. I listened from the stairs. They said some families seemed disconnected. Others were difficult to reach. Someone suggested identifying new families better. I felt my jaw clench. I imagined those marks on our bags being discussed at tables. Not candy. Data. Nobody talked about break-ins or suspicious behavior. Just organization, involvement, who fits, who adapts, who stays quiet. It felt like Halloween gave them the perfect cover. Hundreds of kids volunteering information without realizing. Over the next few months, new families either became super active in neighborhood events or stayed invisible. Some moved again. Some complained quietly about gossip. I noticed familiar houses getting special treatment, small favors, shared tools. Others got ignored. I never forgot the feeling of pen tapping plastic, that soft, quick mark, like a secret stamp of approval or warning. Halloween is supposed to be chaos, but that night felt organized. Too organized, like adult scouting. Now I check my candy bags every year. Nothing strange happened again. Not like that year. Maybe someone shut it down. Maybe they learned what they needed. Nobody else remembers. Kids forget everything except sugar. I still walk past those houses and see the same adults on porches. They smile wide. Too wide. Maybe they read their results and feel satisfied. Maybe the marks are out there somewhere, locked in someone's drawer. Or maybe Halloween was just their way of seeing who belongs by watching who knocks and who leaves without looking back. I remember that Halloween because I almost skipped it. Not for any dramatic reason. I was just tired of walking around with plastic fangs and getting gum stuck in my pockets. My parents said I needed fresh air, so I grabbed an old jacket, threw on some fake blood, and met up with a couple kids from my street. The sky felt too dark for how early it was, like clouds were stacked above the houses. The wind pushed leaves in circles around our feet. The whole neighborhood buzzed with this weird nervous energy, but maybe that was just me. We went down the usual route. The first few houses acted normal, just smiling parents and candy bowls overflowing. Nothing interesting. Tiny kids waddled past with pumpkin buckets full of chocolate they could barely carry. Teenagers in hoodies leaned against fences pretending to be too cool to care but still wanting candy. The street smelled like fog machine smoke and old leaves. We hit house after house, stuffing everything into bags until they crinkled with every step. We heard about this one house up the block giving away little costume prize stickers. Kids talked about it like a secret bonus. Nothing big, just tiny circles of shiny color you slap on your shirt. Some said you could collect different colors and brag about it at school. Sounded dumb, but we went anyway. When we got there, the yard was decorated with foam tombstones and a cheap fake well in the corner. Nothing impressive. The man on the porch smiled too wide and held a roll of stickers in his hand. He stuck one directly on my chest without asking. Felt weird, but I assumed it was harmless. The sticker was small, almost the size of a dime, with a dull green shine. We walked away laughing about how cheap it looked. A few houses later, another adult handed out a different colored sticker. This time purple. He placed it on my shoulder like he was careful about where it went. I wondered if teachers planned this stuff, some kind of school game to promote community spirit. My friends bragged about getting 2 different colors already. I checked mine again, trying to peel them, but they stuck tight. The glue felt almost industrial. I scraped at it, but gave up. As the crowd thinned, we noticed certain adults watched us longer than normal. Not smiling, not talking, just watching how many stickers we had. One lady leaned forward like she wanted to count how many circles were stuck to my jacket. She read something on a notepad behind her candy bowl. I got this uncomfortable twist in my chest, but kept moving. We reached a street lined with huge maple trees. Leaves carpeted the ground so thick we dried our shoes through them like snow. Halfway down, a man sitting on a lawn chair waved us over. He had a bowl of stickers hanging from his wrist and an empty bowl of candy on his lap. He placed a sticker on each of our shirts, each one a different color. He told us with his eyes to hold still. The sticker felt cold for a second like metal. Then he waved us off, scribbling something on a small clipboard. I craned my neck to peek at the page. It had rows and columns with colors listed next to house numbers. My stomach nodded. This was not some school game. It looked like tracking. Which kids visited which houses got repeat visits. Maybe which families allowed kids to roam without parents. The idea rattled around in my head like a coin in a dryer. I looked at the house windows on the street. Some cracked open, some shut tight, some dark curtains. I imagined footsteps in the night walking yard to yard, checking targets. As the night went on, I noticed stickers on other kids too. Not a lot, just the older ones. Little kids got normal candy. The older ones got data tags. Some kids wore 5 or 6 stickers in different colors. They looked proud. I felt sick. I peeled one off, but the glue pulled up threads from my jacket, leaving a circle of frayed fabric. I ripped the other off too. The adhesive left a faint outline like something chemical had soaked into it. We kept going, but I slowed down and stuck to the edges of the street. My friends joked about me being dramatic, but something about how organized this felt scared me. House after house, I saw adults peeking at sticker colors before giving out candy. If a kid had more than three, they got more candy. If they had none, they got less. Some kids were turned away entirely. Those with colorful clusters on their shirts got big handfuls. It felt like a sorting process. Kids unknowingly volunteering to be grouped based on movement across the neighborhood. The night continued. Porch lights flickered. Fog clung low near the ground. Across yards, adults leaned in shadows whispering. I felt like I had been scanned, recorded, logged. I wanted to go home, but my friends pressured me into hitting a few more houses. Peer pressure is annoying, but I gave in for a bit longer. Near the end, we reached a house with almost no decorations, just a dim porch light. A man stood there holding nothing but a small sheet of paper. Instead of giving candy, he walked up and looked right at our shirts. He counted our stickers silently. I only had faint outlines now. He smirked like he already knew. He scratched something on his paper and waved us away like we were disqualified. I felt this chill crawl up my spine that had nothing to do with the cold air. We split up soon after. I walked home alone, checking behind me every few steps. The wind howled through the trees and streetlights buzzed overhead. When I got inside, I emptied my bag onto the kitchen table. Candy spilled everywhere. My parents asked how it went. I said fine. I took my jacket off and stared at the faint adhesive circles where stickers used to be. I threw the jacket on the floor like maybe distance would erase the feeling. For days after Halloween, I kept hearing small rumors. Some kids with lots of stickers got notes on their doors about community events. Others got invites to weird neighborhood clubs. One kid bragged loudly that his family was offered tool-sharing access, like borrowing lawn equipment freely. Smaller perks. One family got a discount card for the local pool. No big prizes, just weird social benefits. Kids with no stickers got ignored, left out. I heard my parents mention a list at a neighborhood meeting. It talked about family involvement, willingness to interact, helpful attitudes. I connected dots. Those stickers were not prizes. They were participation trackers, movement trackers, access trackers. Halloween gave them perfect cover, total freedom to tag without suspicion. I walked past sticker houses sometimes after school. I saw the same adults peering through windows, looking at who walked by. Some kids wore jackets with faint sticker outlines, just like mine. Invisible badges, data points. The next Halloween, I wore plain black clothes. No stickers. If someone tried to tag me, I shrugged them off. I watched from a distance as new kids proudly collected colors. I saw adults writing again. The cycle continued. Maybe it sounds dramatic, but when a community quietly marks its kids using something that sticks too well and tracks too much, you start noticing every set of eyes behind curtains. Sometimes I still feel that faint pull of adhesive on my shirt like a ghost of glue, like someone's still counting. I never thought Halloween could feel like a survey, but that year proved me wrong in ways I still think about. I went out mostly to avoid staying home doing chores. I grabbed some random face paint, an oversized jacket, and a bag I knew would not rip. The street smelled like wet leaves and pumpkin guts. Porch lights flickered everywhere, and kids darted across driveways like loose wires. I met up with a small group near the park, and we planned our route fast. We wanted the houses that always handed out the good stuff. The first stretch was loud and busy. Parents crowded the sidewalks and yelled at their kids not to run. Music blasted from one yard, and someone set up speakers that shook the ground a little. I stuffed candy into my bag without thinking, focusing more on staying warm. I noticed some kids kept coughing from the cold air, but nobody cared. It felt normal enough. We pushed on deeper into the neighborhood, following clusters of glow sticks in the dark. Halfway down a long street lined with huge old trees, we reached a house I had never seen decorated before. The porch had simple orange lights and a giant poster board propped beside the candy bowl. The adult running it looked tired and wore a jacket zipped up to his neck. He gestured for kids to come forward. When I stepped up, he handed me candy, then asked something weird. He wanted to know how often I missed school from being sick. Not with words, more like pointing at boxes on his poster board. The chart had columns labeled with short phrases like sometimes or often. He tapped the one he wanted me to answer and waited. I hesitated. It felt wrong handing out personal info on a porch at night, but a group of kids behind me was getting impatient, so I pointed to the box that meant rarely. He nodded and marked something on the chart with a marker. He made a small scratch next to a number that probably matched me. I glanced at the chart more closely. Rows and columns stretched across it, full of small marks and symbols. It was messy but organized enough to mean something. I shrugged it off and moved on, figuring it was some fundraising thing or a weird school project. A few houses later, another adult asked the same question. This time she got a small sheet on a clipboard. She looked at my jacket, my face, and then made a mark next to a line. Nobody freaked out. Everyone just kept moving like this was part of Halloween. My friends answered without thinking, laughing at how odd it was. They joked about getting graded for coughing. I forced a laugh but felt uneasy. The further we went, the more houses asked similar questions. Not directly with words, but gestures and tapping charts. Some had big posters. Others had tiny notebooks. They asked about sick days, coughs, headaches, missing classes, doctor visits. It was creepy. Some kids bragged about skipping school all the time. Those answers got bigger marks. I watched carefully. The adults seemed to write differently depending on who answered. Thick marks for kids with lots of sick days. Thin marks for kids with none. Some kids did not get candy if their answers annoyed the adults. That part hit different. Like this was less about candy and more about classifying us. We reached a house where the line was long. The porch was bright, and several adults huddled around a massive chart-taped plywood. The board had a map of streets sketched faintly across the bottom. Kids stepped up one by one, pointed to answers about being homesick, and got tiny stickers next to their street blocks. When the adults heard certain answers, they looked at each other, nodding, whispering, checking something off. I stared too long, and one adult looked back at me sharply. I grabbed my candy and hurried away. My friends thought it was hilarious. They made fake coughs and pretended to limp when getting candy. The adults wrote faster when they did that. I kept my answers vague. I hated being stared at by strangers holding markers. The air got colder, and the crowd thinned as younger kids headed home. Porch lights started clicking off around us. The sound of leaves scraping driveways filled the quiet. As we walked, I noticed patterns. Houses that asked sick questions usually had less decorations and more paperwork scattered around. Windows cracked open showed charts stacked on tables. Some had binders full of pages marked with symbols. I slowed down at one porch and saw laminated sheets with columns labeled by weeks. A calendar of sickness. I stepped back, deciding that candy was not worth it, but my friends dragged me forward anyway. The adult at that house pointed at his chart, then my chest. He wanted to know how often I stayed home sick during winter. I pointed to rarely because I did not want to feed whatever this was. He frowned and wrote something beside my answer in a rushed scribble. He gave me a single piece of candy, almost like punishment. Another kid behind me bragged about being sick all the time. That kid got a handful. The adults congratulated him silently with how they wrote on the chart. I watched that scribble. It looked bold, important. I did not like it. As we reached the back end of the neighborhood, the questions continued. Some adults handed out candy while circling house numbers on printed lists. Others scanned our bags and then asked follow-up questions about missing school. It felt too coordinated. Like someone set this up in advance. Nobody admitted it, though. Everyone just acted like Halloween took a weird turn, and that was normal. When we reached a house with almost no decorations, the adult there held a flashlight pointed at our faces. He stared in our eyes like he was checking something. He asked about fevers by pointing at a temperature symbol on a page. He recorded our answers quickly. He gave candy to kids who got fevers often. I got nothing. My friends laughed awkwardly and pulled me along. The final stretch felt colder. The streets emptied fast. Porch lights blinked off one by one. I could see stars through gaps in clouds. The night felt heavier than usual. When we stepped onto my street, I noticed one neighbor writing something on a notepad while staring at windows. He saw me watching and stopped. He slipped the pad into his pocket and walked inside. I went home and dumped my candy out. My parents asked how it went. I said fine. I went upstairs and sat by my window, staring at the neighborhood. I pictured those charts stacked inside houses. I imagined adults comparing notes, seeing which kids stayed home during school days, which houses kept kids indoors more often. Maybe they wanted to know who would be around if something spread, who had weaker immune systems, who might pass things around. The idea sank heavy in my chest. Halloween was supposed to be random, not organized. Over the next few weeks, weird things happened. Certain families got wellness checks from neighbors. Some kids got invited to join after-school programs about health. Others were ignored completely. Teachers asked more questions about symptoms in class. Parents held meetings about attendance. It all lined up too neatly with those porch charts. Some families moved quietly after winter started. Others installed air purifiers and kept windows shut. Adults whispered about seasonal illness like it was a contest. I remembered the bold marks on charts. Thick strokes for certain kids, thin for others. The pattern felt too intentional. This Halloween, I walked past those same houses. No charts this time, just candy bowls. But I saw adults watch kids who coughed. They noticed things quietly now. They did not need posters anymore. They had read their charts already. I did not plan on getting chased on Halloween. Honestly, I barely planned on even going out. I was tired. My backpack had homework I would probably ignore, and my costume was whatever I found in a drawer. I slapped on some face paint and left before my parents changed their minds about letting me wander. The neighborhood buzzed with porch lights and cheap decorations. Every yard had plastic bones and webs stuck to them like someone rushed to make things look spooky. Little kids screamed and ran around while parents walked way too slow behind them. It all felt normal enough. Nothing special. My friends messaged me to meet on the main street. When I got there, they were already trading candy like they were running a market. I joined them and started moving house to house. The usual stuff. Half the porches had bowls already empty, like greedy kids beat us there earlier. I grabbed whatever was left and stuffed it into my bag. We laughed at our lame costumes and joked about teachers that we hoped were home to give candy so we could judge our houses. We talked trash about one kid who wore the same costume every year. The night felt basic. After about 30 minutes, we reached a street that people rarely went down because the houses were older and the lights stayed dim. Those houses always gave weird stuff, like apples or coupons, but sometimes you got lucky. My friends wanted to check anyway because someone said a house near the end gave full-size bars. Full-size bars are like treasure on Halloween. We walked down the cracked sidewalk, stepping over bumps from huge tree roots. The whole street felt quieter. Even the kids behind us went another direction. Porch lights flickered like they were confused. Halfway down the street, we noticed a house with no decorations at all, not even a pumpkin. The porch light was barely on, just a pale glow spilling onto the steps. My friends wanted to skip it, but the bowl on a small table caught my eye. It had candy, real candy, not cheap mints. I stepped up and grabbed a couple pieces. My bag rustled from the weight. I turned around and suddenly heard a voice behind me. Not loud, just controlled. I spun back and saw the homeowner. An older man, thin, hunched slightly, wearing a sweater that sagged at the shoulders. He held a walking stick. His eyes stared right through me. At first he just glared. I thought maybe he wanted us to take only one piece. Classic old person reaction. I mumbled something like thanks and walked down the steps. My friends grabbed their candy too. But as we stepped off his driveway, I heard a tapping sound. Slow at first, then faster. I turned and saw the old man stepping down his porch with a walking stick, leaning on it hard. His face twisted like we did something wrong. He shouted, accusing us of something. We froze, confused. People take candy on Halloween. That is the deal. But he looked furious, like we stole from him. We backed up slowly. The man moved faster than I expected. He jabbed the walking stick toward us like a herding tool, telling us to get off his property. We already were. My heart kicked hard in my chest. My friends whispered to run. Without planning it, we bolted. The man chased us, tapping the stick against the sidewalk. One of my friends tripped on broken concrete and scrambled back up. The old man got closer than I was comfortable with. He had wiry strength behind that stick. I could hear it smack the ground like someone knocking on doors. We sprinted toward the intersection at the end of the street. Halloween crowds were thicker there. I figured once we hit the main flow of people, he would stop. Adults usually stop when there are witnesses, but he did not. He speed-walked behind us, swinging the stick like it was personal. Some kids stared and laughed because they thought it was a costume act. But the old man's face said it was not a joke. He pointed the walking stick at us, yelling about respect and trespassing. Something about people thinking they can take whatever they want. I did not bother arguing. I just kept running. We cut through a yard, dodging inflatable pumpkins. He followed us around the fence. I heard the stick scrape against wood. We ducked behind a group of parents, but he kept coming. The parents stared but did nothing. Maybe they thought he was just dramatic. Halloween noise drowned out everything, so his voice sounded like background chaos. We ran down another street, bags slapping against our sides. I tried to throw pieces of candy out to lighten the load. My legs burned, lungs tightening, but adrenaline pushed me. We reached a cul-de-sac that looped around to the back of the street. Bad move. Dead end. We turned around, looking for another way. The old man appeared through the gap between hedges, walking faster than any angry grandpa should. He tapped the stick against the pavement, tapping like a countdown. I wanted to apologize even though we did nothing wrong, but his face told me that would not matter. He waved the stick like he was scaring off animals. My friends whispered in panic. We squeezed through the small yard gap of another house, stepping in mud and dead leaves. Mud soaked my shoes and slowed me down. The yard smelled like dogs were kept there too long. We slipped past a broken fence board, cutting our hands slightly. The old man reached the fence a second later, poking the stick between slats, trying to jab at us. Splinters rained down. I felt like I was in some low-budget chase movie. We ran across someone's deck and jumped down the other side. Dogs barked from behind windows. Porch lights snapped on. Neighbors yelled at shadows. It all blurred together. We reached a narrow alley behind a row of houses. Trash cans lined the side, lids half open. The old man followed. He stepped carefully but fast, tapping his stick to keep balance. I saw him use it like a third leg, stabilizing his weight before lunging forward. My back tore on a jagged piece of fence wire, spilling candy everywhere. Candy bounced and scattered, wrappers crinkling. I ignored it. My friends left theirs behind too. We just wanted distance. The alley spit us out near another street with brighter lights. Kids were everywhere. Laughter, glowing toy swords, flashing pumpkin buckets. Safety, or so I thought. The old man slowed but did not stop. He stood at the mouth of the alley, staring. His eyes scanned the crowd until they locked on us. He raised the stick to point like he marked us. Some adults noticed him now. One father stepped over and asked him something. The old man pointed at us, waving his stick wildly. The father shook his head and shrugged, walking away. Nobody believed grown-ups yelling on Halloween. Too much chaos to care. We kept moving, slower now, trying to blend. We ducked behind a house with bright purple lights. My legs shook. My breath stung like I inhaled cold needles. We waited, peeking around the corner every few seconds. The old man walked up the street like a hunter tracking footprints. He tapped his stick against mailboxes, listening like he could hear where we went. I could not believe this level of obsession over candy. My friends whispered theories. Maybe we accidentally knocked something over. Maybe we took more than allowed. Maybe he hated teenagers. When he passed us by, we stayed hidden for another 5 minutes. The cold air made sweat cling to my neck. When we finally returned to our route, we avoided that entire section of the neighborhood. Porch lights flickered, and the whole place felt like eyes were everywhere. I expected him to pop out again. My chest kept bouncing between calm and panic. Eventually, we decided to call it. Our bags were half empty after losing so much while running. We walked back home, sticking to the busiest streets. When I got to my driveway, my legs felt like rubber. I slammed the door behind me and locked it. Maybe dramatic, but whatever. I washed my scraped hand and tried to calm down. But that was not the end. For the next few days, I noticed the old man walking the neighborhood in daylight. He tapped that walking stick along fences, staring at houses like he was memorizing who lived where. People waved politely, but he barely nodded. He scanned porches like searching for something missing. I stayed indoors when I saw him. Weeks passed. He faded back into normal routine, I guess. But every time I passed his street, I saw that porch, empty bowl, faint glow, and my stomach twisted. I read online once that some people get territorial over Halloween like it's a test about manners. Maybe he snapped. Maybe he watched too many kids ignore his rules. But chasing us down yards and alleys, marking us with that stare, I do not know. This year I thought about skipping, but my friends motivated me again. When we reached that same street, the house was dark. Porch light off. Bulb on. No decorations. No candy. I tried to hide my sigh of relief. But as we walked past, I noticed a gap between curtains inside. Someone watched the sidewalk, stick leaning against the wall. Maybe some people never stop keeping track. Maybe Halloween just reveals who gets pushed past their limit.